This is the biggest, most important news I've ever announced, so in true Renee fashion, hi, my name is Renee, I'm an appliance repair tech, and recently I quit my job. But don't worry, you can take the Renee out of the appliance repair, but you can't take the appliance repair out of Renee. Just because I'm not repairing appliances for the company that I used to work for anymore doesn't mean I'm going to stop making appliance-related content. In fact, my appliance content and the support of my audience are the reasons why I quit my job in the first place. But for you to truly understand what I mean by that, I need to give you the backstory of how I became an appliance repair tech and what it's been like working in a career that I never expected to fall into. I apologize in advance, this is going to be long. I did say this is the most important thing I've ever announced, so just think of my other content like a running series, and this is more like Renee, the origin story, the movie. When I was a kid, the very first answer that I ever gave to the question, what do you want to be when you grow up, was an artist. As I got older, I was told by society that that was not a very realistic career goal because the chances of being able to make a living as an artist are very slim. So being a practical person, and also one with generalized anxiety and a fear of failure, I looked for different career options as I got older. Ones that would be both fulfilling while also allowing me to be able to put a roof over my head. But nothing ever felt like a good fit. I jumped from potential career path to potential career path all throughout school. Everything from being a civil engineer all the way to being a fashion designer. But I would lose interest in whatever career I had chosen after a few months or a few years. This was over a decade before I was diagnosed with ADHD, so it all kind of makes sense now. And by the time I graduated high school, I had finally decided that I wanted to be a photographer. Photography felt different from all the other options that I had considered. I had always loved taking photos, and it seemed like a more practical way to make a living as an artist. And over the years, I tried many different ways to make my passion for photography into a career. But after a while, it became more and more apparent that me being a professional photographer was not what I wanted either. I wanted to be a portrait photographer, but I wanted to create fine art portraits. The clients of most photography studios want what they ask for, like family portraits and maternity shoots, not the creative vision of a photographer who likes the aesthetic of a chic ghost in an abandoned building. I lived the starving artist life for a while, working creative jobs like face painting, teaching paint nights, working in a high school senior portrait photography studio, but none of these jobs were exactly what I wanted to be doing, and none of them paid enough so that I didn't have to have several other part-time jobs just in order to pay the bills. So in addition to the creative jobs I held, I worked a ton of other random whatever I can get type jobs. Food service, retail at a mall kiosk, customer service in a call center, you name it. But the problem with working a bunch of part-time jobs in the United States is that even if you are working multiple of them at once, it's still next to impossible to afford healthcare. And those part-time jobs generally don't give you enough hours to be able to get healthcare through your job. So I still do photography as a hobby, but eventually I did give up on my hope of becoming a full-time photographer as my career. And instead I just looked for any full-time work that would come with the benefits that I needed to, survive in the world. And for years, I applied to all sorts of different full-time positions, but I was never really able to make it past the interview stage. I had been in the gifted program all throughout school and then AP, advanced placement classes in high school, but nobody seemed to care about any of that because I didn't have a college degree. And then one day, a friend and former coworker of mine reached out to me. He was working as an appliance repair tech and loving it. He also knew that I was looking for work, and he knew that the company that he worked for was hiring. So he reached out to me to say that he was confident that I would be good at appliance repair and that he would even recommend me for the position if I wanted to apply. I had never even considered appliance repair as a career, but I had always been pretty good at DIY repairs and just kind of figuring out how things work, so I figured I would give it a shot. I also knew that it was a very male-dominated field, but my mom, who also had a lot of different jobs throughout her lifetime, including being an exterior house painter for a little while, raised me to know without a doubt that gender does not impact job performance. So on my friend's recommendation, I got the interview. My friend also told me there would be a test, and he told me what to study up on, including basic plumbing and electrical knowledge. So me being the AP kid that I always will be at heart, I did a ton of research beforehand, and I aced the exam. So of course they were very curious where I learned everything because I didn't have a trade school listed on my resume. And rather than making something up, I was honest with them. I told them I didn't have any appliance repair experience, but that I had a strong drive to learn. And I feel like my acing the test kind of proved that to them. I also made sure they knew I had a lot of customer service experience. So they spoke to me a little bit longer, then left the room to think about it, and when they came back, they told me they decided to offer me the job. They decided that my amount of customer service experience and also acing the test were enough to give me a chance. I started my career as a tech in February 2017, shadowing another more experienced technician, and 6 months later, in August 2017, I was out of training and on my own. Appliance repair may not have ticked the artist box, but it was the most stable career I had ever been offered, and it was very rewarding to be able to help people with their problems. Plus, I found that repairing appliances was a lot like solving puzzles, which is another thing that I've always loved doing. And through appliance repair, I discovered that I not only had a passion for repair, but for helping people as well. I began to develop a great rapport with my customers, and my managers would constantly give me glowing reviews. For the first time in my life, I was working a career that I actually enjoyed. My workplace wasn't toxic like every other place I had worked, and I had health insurance. And then came COVID. I was furloughed from work from March 2020 until June 2020. So 3 months, and then it was back to work in people's houses, decked out in full PPE. And I was absolutely terrified. Because again, not only was I an AP kid, therefore I follow the science, but I felt like I had just hit my 30s and I was just beginning to understand how the world worked. And then the world completely shattered and we all experienced a collective trauma, but I powered through. And in November 2020, I joined TikTok because I missed connecting with people the way that I was able to before the world caught on fire. And I started on TikTok with a video of me talking about all of my various hobbies and interests. And of course, because ADHD, there were a lot of costume changes. In that video, I did happen to mention that I was also an appliance repair tech, and that seemed to pique people's interest. So in addition to the other content that I was creating at the time, I started making a few helpful appliance videos. And those helpful appliance videos were what resonated with people the most, so I kept making them. And my following kept growing, and I was loving the community on TikTok. In 2021, I started getting tens of thousands of followers and then hundreds of thousands. I started getting offers to be on podcasts and made a little bit of money in the TikTok Creator Fund. And I would have hundreds of people just telling me that they followed my advice and that it helped them. Meanwhile, I was still going to work every day in full PPE and having customers tell me that they didn't believe parts were backordered due to the pandemic. In fact, they didn't believe the pandemic was real at all. And that was on top of the daily misogyny that I had to endure as a woman working in a skilled trade. Unfortunately, I also experienced a few traumatic events in my personal life in 2021 that I don't want to get into, but in December of 2021, it all became too much, and I had my very first mental breakdown. I was 32 years old, I had been depressed for months, and it felt like the world was ending. I was in a customer's house replacing the glass on their cooktop, and behind my glasses and my mask, I just started silently crying. My customer was in the other room and had absolutely no idea that any of it was even happening. I kept it very, very quiet. So I finished the repair, I left her house, and I was not able to stop crying for 5 hours. In January 2022, I took a leave of absence from work, and in February, I felt well enough to return. And then in mid-March 2022, I was driving on the highway in my work van after a huge snowstorm, and I was going about 65 miles an hour when a giant sheet of ice flew off the top of a Sprinter van, went way high up in the air, and came crashing down into my windshield. The windshield was absolutely shattered, but I was physically fine, so I was able to safely pull over and get everything sorted out. But the trauma of the accident sent me into another mental breakdown, and I had to take another leave of absence from work for my mental health. I started seeing a therapist and taking medication, and then by May 2022, I felt well enough to return to work again. And returning was difficult, but manageable. I had felt anxious every single day since the accident, but I was learning to live with feeling uncomfortable all the time. Meanwhile, I started getting more and more attention on social media, and my following had expanded to multiple platforms. I'd been interviewed by popular mechanics, I had made a sponsored video for Cascade, and I had even been invited out to the Procter & Gamble headquarters to visit the research and development labs, talk to their scientists, and visit the P&G archives that are not even open to the public. And when I received emails from these companies, of course it was always in the middle of the day on a weekday because that's when they're working and it's also when I was working. So I'd be on a lunch break at work, sitting in my van in a McDonald's parking lot, scrolling through my phone, checking my emails, and I'd get an email offering to personally fly me out to Cincinnati and treat me like a VIP. And then I'd have to clock back in and go lay on a rude customer's dirty kitchen floor while I repair their dishwasher. And I would make jokes all the time about how I felt like I was living a double life, like Hannah Montana, like appliance repair technician by day and social media sensation by night. And although I did have a lot of rude customers, that's not to say that I didn't also have really amazing customers as well. I've had plenty of amazing customers as well during my time as an appliance tech. But I know I'm not the only one that's noticed that ever since the beginning of the COVID pandemic, the general public, at least in the United States, has gotten so much more rude and entitled. My entire worldview began to shift, and I started dreading going into strangers' houses more and more every day. I used to have a lot more trust in the general public, but the pandemic allowed more and more of my customers to show me their true colors, no matter how terrible. And when I say terrible, I mean it. Trust me, I have a lot of stories that I am going to tell y'all eventually that I did not feel comfortable sharing at the time. So content creation was starting to become a full-time job for me, and I was loving every minute of it. I was being offered more sponsored video opportunities, gaining more followers, and developing new relationships within the appliance industry and appliance adjacent industries as well. I was getting thank yous from people in my comment sections and physical thank yous sometimes in my PO box from people I'd helped, and I started feeling good about helping people again. But it was a lot of work on top of the full-time job I already had. And that, coupled with experiencing a whole new set of personal traumatic events at the end of 2022, led to me having a third mental breakdown and leave of absence from work in June 2023. And on September 8th, 2023, I returned to work. I wasn't entirely sure if I was ready to return to work yet, but I knew that I had to try. My first week back wasn't easy, but it was going well overall, and my partner and I had even planned a celebratory camping trip for that weekend. And then on Friday, September 15th, after the majority of my workday went smoothly, and I was thinking about what else I needed to pack for the camping trip, I parked my work van in a commuter parking lot to look for a part. I climbed into the back of my van, I found the part, I hopped out of the back of my work van, landed on a curb that I didn't see, and I broke my ankle. We had to cancel the camping trip. And when you break your ankle, everyone is quick to say the same thing. It's better to break your ankle than to sprain it. And they say that because it takes 6 to 8 weeks to heal a broken bone, but it takes much, much longer to heal ligaments damaged from a bad sprain. But what they don't tell you, or they don't realize, is that most times when you break your ankle in the way that I did, you also sprain it. So at the beginning of December, about 12 weeks after I had originally broken it, my ankle still had not healed enough for me to be able to return to work. I was able to walk again, but after 12 weeks of not using my right leg, my right calf muscle was noticeably smaller and weaker than my left. So trying to do anything more than a slow-paced walk was challenging. And stairs were my biggest concern because I live in New England. A lot of homes have stairs. And I couldn't go downstairs unless I had a really, really sturdy handrail, which is something a lot of people don't have in their homes. So I was getting more and more anxious by the day, intrusive thoughts all of the time. When would I go back to feeling normal? When would I be able to return to work? And if I did, who's to say that something else wasn't going to happen and I'd have to be out of work again? And around this time, something occurred to me. I had been out of work for 12 weeks with my broken ankle. And before that, I had only been back to work 1 week after taking a 3-month leave of absence for my mental health. I had been unable to work for nearly 6 months, but somehow I was still able to pay all of my bills. Yes, I had FMLA for the mental health leave, and I had workers' comp for my ankle because it did happen at work. But trust me when I say that those did not pay enough to survive on. The only reason why I hadn't been struggling is because of the income that I was making from content creation. When I first started making content in 2020, I never thought that it was going to turn into a career. And I remember when I first started getting a tiny bit of money from it, thinking, you know, maybe possibly one day I might be able to quit my day job. But I'm also not the kind of person who's going to quit their stable, full-time job with benefits the second I start making a tiny bit of money somewhere else. And now, over 3 years later, after realizing that content creation has been sustaining me for the better part of 2023, I took another look at it. And I realized that content creation had become so much more than just a hobby. It really had become a full-blown career. And while I was still doing appliance repair, I was essentially working 2 full-time jobs. Not only that, but one of those full-time jobs felt a lot more fulfilling than the other. No wonder I was so burned out all the time. It was finally becoming clear to me that I had hit a tipping point and I needed to make a decision. I could either be a full-time appliance repair tech or I could be a full-time content creator, but not both. 2023 had proven to me that my body and my mind could only handle one or the other. And so on December 22nd, 2023, after having an accountant go over my finances to make sure that I wasn't making the biggest financial mistake of my life, I quit my job as an appliance repair tech. But again, you can take the Renee out of the appliance repair, but you can't take the appliance repair out of Renee. My appliance content isn't going anywhere. Just because I'm not going into customers' houses every day doesn't mean that I can't make educational appliance content. In fact, I did exactly that for the majority of 2023. I may no longer be in the field, but that doesn't just erase my 6.5 years worth of field experience. It doesn't erase all of the training I've had, and it doesn't erase my passion for appliances and for helping others. Plus, I have friends who do still work in the field, and I have contacts within the industry. Working as an appliance repair tech made me see that there is a need for customer education in the appliance industry, and there are very few people helping with it. As an appliance repair tech, I was able to help with that issue a little, but as an educational appliance creator, I'm able to help with that problem on a much larger scale. So quitting my day job doesn't mean that I'm quitting appliances. It just means that now I have a lot more time to be able to help a much larger audience, to help the people who followed along with me on my journey for the last 3 years, the people who understand that I am more than just my job. Content creation has allowed me to make connections in the appliance industry that I never would have had, connections that aren't just going to disappear because I quit my day job. I have all the tools and resources at hand to begin the next era of my career as an appliance care and maintenance educator. For me, content creation has always been more than just a hobby. When I started creating content, it felt like everything just clicked. All of the skills that I had acquired throughout my various jobs seemed to be put to use in content creation. Like well before I entered the workforce, I was learning how to film and edit video when I was 12 years old. I've been comfortable with public speaking practically my entire life. My photography's been published in magazines and won contests as early as my early 20s. I've been passionate about making a positive difference in the world. I've just never had a platform to do so until now. Appliance repair fulfilled that passion a little bit and allowed me to help others, but it left a gaping hole in the creativity department, one that content creation has been able to fill and then some. Quitting my day job was one of the most terrifying things I've ever done in my life. But when you finally find that thing that feels like it's what you're meant to be doing, it's worth taking the risk. I've got some big plans and I am incredibly excited to bring you all with me. And I just wanted to say thank you all so much for your continued support over the last 3 years. You have made it possible for my dreams to come true in ways I never could have imagined. I literally could not have done it without you. So allow me to reintroduce myself. Hi, my name is Renee and I'm an appliance care and maintenance educator.